Hey, remember that time that the Mets were supposed to be the team that was going to trade off all their guys at midseason and we're going to just move on? This was a rebuilding season. Don't you remember that? Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I don't either. That's because the Mets effing won, beat the Phillies. We're going to talk about it tonight and how this might just be some crazy fever dream I might be having right now. But in the off chance it's a reality, let's talk about how this is the greatest Met team maybe of all time. I don't know. Let's think about it. Mike's Mets podcast coming up next. Hello, welcome to Mike's Mets podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pashota. Happy Thursday to you, or actually Wednesday to you, and myself. We are ecstatic right now. The New York Mets have actually done it. And I was being a little facetious before saying that this was the best Met team maybe ever. Might be the most inspiring team since 1969, though. I think that's they got to be up there. This is a team that no one was expecting. They have not gotten nearly enough credit. They have completed a miraculous run, and as always, it's the team that completes the wild card that heads into the NLDS with the momentum. They haven't had the long stoppage in between the regular season ending and going into the playoffs, and the Phillies were on the short end of that stick this time. Not that I'm going to complain. I'm certainly not going to feel bad for the Phillies, who fought us tooth and nail throughout the series, and we saw definitely more than a few heart attack moments. I think I had 3 or 4 over the course of that last inning with Edwin Diaz. More on him later. But let's say that this is maybe the most enjoyable, I guess that would be the way to say it, the most enjoyable Met team that we've seen in, I don't know, what it is at this point, 50, 60 years now? It's 50, 55 years, I think, if I'm doing the math right, around there, we're around 55 years or so since 1969, and it's stunning to see them kind of doing this again. Again, they weren't supposed to be doing this. They were not supposed to be in this position. This was a team, like I said, that everyone had written off halfway through the season. It was around June. Mets were playing the Phillies in London town, and Phillies took. It was a 2-game series in London. Phillies took game 1. Mets took game 2 in a crazy, wild way of winning it that seemed to sort of kick off the energy from that point on. And from that point on, the Mets had the best record in baseball down the stretch. And the Philadelphia Phillies were just like, yeah, they're okay. They were about 2 games over 500 from that point on, and that was it. They lost really all their momentum from that point on. They got off to a crazy hot start, and then squandered that hot start. I mean, they were able to maintain their division lead pretty easily throughout the remainder of the season because neither the Braves or the Mets could make up the ground. They got off to that huge start. It was like 15 games or something lead that the Mets were never able to get past them. But you have to wonder if the Mets had kind of started the season with the same momentum, if they had been able to kind of harness all these personalities and make the right necessary moves for it all to kind of work together, if they could have potentially taken this division title. Because I look at these two teams, and the Phillies played badly. Let's say they were not good. This was probably, if you're a Philadelphia Philly fan, you're disappointed in what you saw because the Phillies did not play up to par. I mean, the Mets obviously destroyed them in these final two games. This was pretty lopsided. I mean, not in terms of the amount of runs. It was 11 runs to 3 over the final two games of the series. But you look at like the base hits. I mean, the Phillies scored. The Phillies only managed 5 base hits in Game 3, only 4 in Game 4, and this was just like a complete. They were bamboozled, and you can see it in the way that Harper and Schwarber were just completely shut down in this series from after Game 2. I mean, pretty much after the point of Harper hitting that huge home run, and Castellanos getting the walk-off hit in Game 2, and Mets falling apart and unable to maintain that lead. This should have been 4 games, honestly. Like it was such an easy series win if they'd been able to maintain it in Game 2, and they should have taken it in just 3 games easily, but they did it in 4, and it really took everything from the Phillies to just get that second game, but they were completely absent in Game 3 and Game 4, absent again, and both times it was from pitchers that, when the Mets picked them up, there wasn't enormous expectations, but it was Sean Manaea, it was Jose Quintana tonight, and Quintana I've had certainly a lot of feelings about during the year. I said more than once, dump him, get rid of him, I don't want him back. He has kind of changed my tune over this last few weeks with the team. He has just been as dependable and helpful as you could have possibly asked for from your number 4 starter, and they have really leaned on him in these playoffs to be the veteran, to be the experienced hand, to be the guy who can get them over the hump. And this was a game where he was going to be facing his lefty counterpart, Ranger Suarez, and Suarez was fantastic in this game. You have to give it to the Phillies starters for the most part, who were pretty good throughout the series. Obviously, with Zach Wheeler in Game 1, and then from that point on, it was kind of a mixed bag. But Ranger Suarez was electric on the mound today, and then the real culprit for the Phillies was their bullpen. They could not keep the Mets away. It just kept happening over and over and over again. The Mets would see Jeff Hoffman coming into the game, and if you're Rob Thompson, the Phillies manager, you did it because you have to do it because he's been arguably their best reliever. Hoffman has been terrific all season. And had one of the all-time meltdowns in Phillies reliever history. It was insane. This guy could not stop them. Every time he came in, it was like the Mets batting average just jumped up to 1,000, and you would see Hoffman visibly upset. He couldn't get anybody out, and this happened again, and he had no control in this game. Going to that 6th inning, he was all over the place, lucked out, got an out, and then Thompson was like, okay, we're going to take you out now because you don't have anything, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't put you in this game. It was pretty insane. So they bring in Estevez, who's been fantastic for the Phillies also this entire season, and bringing in Estevez, the fireball, throws 100 miles an hour to face Lindor, makes a certain amount of sense. Of course, it's Francisco Lindor. And Lindor is now, he's somewhere between Reggie Jackson with the Yankees in 1977 and maybe Babe Ruth. I don't know. It's this is not to say that Lindor's had an amazing playoffs. He's actually been sort of fairly absent from it. They've actually leaned much more on Alonso and Vientos and Iglesias and Albert. Other people have been coming up for them in bigger situations. Nimmo, but Lindor's always been this sort of omnipresent force, which he was of course always going to be. There's a reason why people have named him the MVP, at least Met fans. They have named him this MVP because he can just turn a game on a dime. We saw that in that crazy Atlanta series to finish off this season. He did what was thought to be kind of impossible. It looked like the Mets season was just like hanging on by a thread at that point, and he, one swing, just changed the momentum. All of a sudden, the Mets have all the momentum. All of a sudden, the Mets are the one winning that game. Going into this game, bottom of the sixth, the Mets have not been able to get anybody home, keep blowing a lot of RBI situations, a lot of men left on base, and you got Lindor out there facing a really good Phillies reliever, and Lindor does not shrink from the moment. Lindor is made for October. Lindor is clutch, and he came through in one of the most wild situations. I don't know anybody who was expecting that to happen. He hits a grand slam. It's a grand slam. This is starting to like play out like some kind of like cracked out like Mets fans like thinking of like, it'd be really awesome if Francisco Lindor hit a 2-run home run for a doubleheader to clinch a playoff spot. That'd be awesome, right? And then what if he came into a situation in the NLCS and had a chance to hit a grand slam? And you'd be like, dude, you're absolutely out of your mind if you think any of that's going to happen. The chances of it happening are astronomical. And it's playing out like some kind of crazy fever dream. I keep having to like pinch myself. I'm like, this is actually happening right now? What is happening? And I feel this kind of pull repeatedly over and over again to 1969, like where it was this bombastic season that wasn't supposed to happen. It was 7 years into the Mets franchise history that all of a sudden they won 100 games and went to the playoffs and beat the Braves in the NLCS, and then go into the World Series and have to play the Baltimore Orioles, who were like 1,000-1 like favorites, and the Mets shock them. And this is kind of where we are right now. It's just we're in this sort of situation right now. And if the Los Angeles Dodgers can actually get off their asses and maybe win an NLDS for once, we may see a situation where the Mets have to face another heavy favorite in order to advance in the playoffs. But we'll see how that whole series plays out. But it's getting very interesting. I mean, it was already interesting, but this is very interesting now. We're in very interesting territory right now. An NLCS moment has not happened, obviously, since 2015. We remember how that NLCS went. They were facing the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs were significant favorites. I don't know if major favorites in that one, but they were considered the favorites going into that series. And the Mets handed them their bags in 4. It was a very easy sweep, mostly thanks to Daniel Murphy, who went on this crazy stretch. If I was to guess who was going to have this kind of fairy tale, like storybook playoff performance similar to Murphy, I would guess it would be Vientos. Vientos has been sort of this the threat that Lindor has not been for most of this playoffs. Vientos has been scary. He has been coming up in increasingly crazy situations, and he is legit. There is no question that Vientos, after his performance in this series, everybody knows who Vientos is. Everybody's looking at him with a lot of interest, and they're looking at the fact that this guy could not keep a job with the club for various points over his career. Even earlier this season, when they would send him down and call him back up, it happened more than once, and he's now up permanently, and he's a fixture there, and he is truly transformed his game. That's to the point that he is a guy who you look at as like a borderline all-star going forward. He is shown he is a easy power threat. He's got 20, 30 home run power, no question. He has turned himself into a reliable option at third base, something I did not think was ever going to happen. But you look at him like now and you're like, wow, he actually moves really well out there, and he has a really strong arm at third, and he's able to make good moves. It's actually pretty astonishing to watch Vientos' growth and see how well it's not only how well he's progressed at the plate, but also in the field and how well he does now. And then you have to look at Alonso, and he's kind of turned everything around after a certain point where people were suitably upset with him. I think we, as a fan base, we kind of like reached our last nerve with the fact that Alonso was doing absolutely nothing over the final stretch, and we kept waiting for him to do something, and it wouldn't happen. And then finally, he goes off, and he gets a 3-run home run in the end to help clinch that series in Milwaukee, and then goes off again in this Phillies series. He keeps hitting home runs, and then he now looks like the Alonso of old. He's looking much better at the plate, and they're going to need him to be continuing to play like that. I don't really know what has been going on with other players. Iglesias' bat has been kind of like hot colds, but he's been overall solid for the team. He keeps coming up with good clutch base hits. Brandon Nimmo's been a guy who's been able to come up in certain situations and come up with big shots himself, but he's just been that steady hand in the middle of that lineup. And then you have Alvarez, who's kind of a wild card. You don't know what he's going to come through, but he's had his own share of big hits. It's become a running point now with the Mets that they just kind of passed the baton. I think Carlos Mendoza, the Met manager, had said that earlier tonight when he was talking to Fox Sports, and he had said something about like, oh well, yeah, it's just them sort of. It's one guy. It's not just one guy. It's a number of guys. In this case, it was mostly all Lindor in this game, but it's just the baton just kind of gets passed from guy to guy, and it wasn't Lindor for most of the series. It was mostly Vientos and Alonso, and in this game, it was mostly Lindor, and that's just the way it goes. They just keep passing the baton from guy to guy and saying you're gonna be the guy in this game. You're gonna be the guy who gets us over the hump and puts us in a position to win because we need you to step up now. And that guy easily takes up the baton and says, yes, I will now lead and we will win this game because I am the guy holding the baton now. It's just been going like that, and it seems ridiculous. It doesn't seem like this is like a sustainable model, and it's not. It's not something that would, for an entire season, be a sustainable model. But this is the postseason. This is where everything goes really batshit crazy, and no one knows what to expect from game to game because some guys might be playing well. Sometimes you're the Philadelphia Phillies that won 95 games this season, and then completely crap out in the NLDS. Man. I really feel for Hoffman just because I would certainly feel very similar ways about Edwin Diaz at certain points in this postseason where I've been like, you stupid, just throw strikes, okay, just do it. And Jeff Hoffman has just been that guy for the Phillies. He has been where you're like, that guy was fantastic in the regular season. What happened to him? He just if the Phillies could shoot him, like Phillies fan base could like take him, strap him to a rocket, and shoot him into the sun, they would do it. I have no question about that. They are burning him in effigy right now for just being completely incapable of getting any of the Mets out, and that's just the way it's gone for the Phillies, where the bats just got really ice cold, and people were saying, like, you know, at various points during this playoffs that, like, wow, they have a great lineup, 1 through 9, and then, like, the 7 through 9 hitters would never hit anything, and then it was the middle of the order. It would be Schwarber and Harper were suddenly ice cold, and and they didn't have any depth. Like, the bench Rob Thompson would have to continually keep going to Clemens' kid, and then you'd have him in it. I felt like Clemens came in every ninth inning situation over and over again. To the point I was like, I cannot wait until they stop playing this guy. But when it came down to in that ninth inning, which was, I gotta say, in a series full of just like clinch yourself moments, this was like the ultimate clinch. I was just like, oh my God, Edwin Diaz can't throw strikes. He walked the first 2 guys of the inning. And now we have a situation where he could potentially put like even more guys on, and then you have Kyle Schwarber coming up later in this game if you don't get people out. And they got people out, they got 2 people out, but then it came up to Schwarber with 2 guys on, and you're like, at the tying run up to the plate, and it's freaking Kyle Schwarber, and you're like, and in my Met mind, which is the mind I go into when I'm sensing everything falling apart for the Mets. In my Met mind, I'm thinking, oh God, he's going to hit a 3-run home run, and the game's going to be tied, and then the Mets are going to have to try and make some kind of crazy comeback again in the bottom of the ninth. And I bet they do it, but I would prefer they don't go down that route because I'm not sure if they actually hold on to this and win it, and then we have to go back and face Zach Wheeler again in Game 5, which is going to be a very difficult situation to potentially win. So in my Met mind, I'm already kind of playing all that out. I'm like, oh God, they're going to a Game 5 against Zach Wheeler. Can they actually play it all out? And then it comes down to I actually had to like mute the game at a certain point because I couldn't stand the Fox announcers seemingly willing the Phillies back into this game. Where I was like, please stop like jinxing us and forcing the Phillies back into it. Could you just not do that? And against all odds, Edwin Diaz strikes out Schwarber, which wasn't actually against all odds. Schwarber is apparently terrible against Diaz. In every situation that he's come up against him, he can't hit him and actually strikes out almost all the time. So this was a situation that actually favored Diaz significantly. But in everybody's mind, you're like, oh God, it's the guy who can't stop hitting home runs in the postseason against the guy who all of a sudden can't throw strikes. And you're just like, this is going to happen. And it was a really great sequence where he starts him off with a slider and then gets that's ball, and then he gets strike two, and then sets up a situation where he has to throw a high fastball that Schwarber can't hit, strike three, and you're watching it and you're like, oh God, and you feel that relief of they didn't let me down. They didn't let me down, and I when it hits you, you're like, because as a Met fan, you're kind of conditioned to be sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Where you're like, wow, we have a 3-run lead going into the ninth inning, and it's the bottom of their lineup. We got Edwin Diaz on the mound. We got this, and then it starts to sort of like slowly unravel, and you think it's going to happen, and it didn't. And because it didn't happen, you start to think, okay, like, have we crossed like a road? Have we gone over the bridge? Have we reached a point as a franchise now where we start to think, okay, maybe the glass is half full rather than half empty. Maybe now we think this team has something a little bit special about it. I was being facetious before about the Mets being this 2024 Met team being the greatest Met team of all time, but I'm also not really. It's a team that has defied expectations and is also, I think, incredibly close. They have a clear bond with each other that stands out. You can see it. I mean, every team, like, you know, they've been hardened through 162 games at this point. You know, like they're all very close. I'm not going to say the Mets' chemistry is off the charts better than everybody else's, but you can sense that they have created a stronger bond, not just through, just through being in the trenches together. It's also being in the trenches in New York with a media that generally is just like waiting for you to slip up, and a fan base that is at times very apathetic and is often thinking, okay, well, it's all going to fall apart now, and this is where, and I'm not going to blame anybody for thinking that way. It's just the way that we've kind of been conditioned at this point, because the Mets always seem to have let us down in the past. And you look at it and you say, okay, like, they have something more than that. It's that they have a feeling of camaraderie that's built off of no one thought we would be here. To them, it's like they're playing with house money. To them, it's like we weren't supposed to be in the playoffs right now, and we weren't supposed to beat the Brewers in the wild card, and we weren't supposed to beat the Phillies in the NLDS. So now we got to face either the Dodgers or the Padres. Who's it going to be? I don't know, but you look at it and you're like, both those teams are better on paper than the Mets, but when it comes to facing this Met team in real life, you realize that, God, they have a really deep lineup. Wow, they have a really deep bench. Wow, their bullpen is at times crazy, but they've been reinforced with guys like Tyler McGill and David Peterson, who was, again, fantastic in this game. David Peterson, the unsung MVP of this postseason run, who just keeps coming in these situations, and over again, they have leaned on him to be the guy who are like, okay, well, the starter's out now, and rather than rely on a battle-weary bullpen that has thrown a lot of innings in middle relief, we're going to go to our trusty starter, who seems to thrive in these situations. Peterson is it's actually to the point where I would say that Peterson seems to be even better coming out of the bullpen than actually starting the game. And actually, I would prefer that they didn't put him in the starting rotation part, even though I wholeheartedly believe that Peterson deserves to be a game 1 starter or a game 2 starter, or however they put him in. He has been so dependable and electric for this team coming out of the pen, and they have really leaned on him, and it's been such a huge part of this whole success, where it's not just one guy. Like I said, it's a bunch of other guys, and it's Kodai Senga coming in and throwing 2 crazy innings of a start in game 1 that kind of like shakes it up. You're like, what? Why would they throw Kodai Senga? And then everyone's thinking like, okay, like they've lost their minds, and this won't ever work. Things seem to work out. I don't know. Mendoza has like the magic touch. And Carlos Mendoza, I don't know if he's going to win Manager of the Year. In my estimation, he is by far the leading candidate for Manager of the Year. But based on not just the regular season, but this, I mean, they're not supposed to take into account the postseason runs for Manager of the Year. But I mean, God, like he just it's everything he tries just seems to work out. He just is like completely in tune with this team, where he knows who to push and who not to push. And watching his speech in the locker room after the game, it gave me chills. I was like close to tears. This guy gets it. He's been here 1 year. He knows New York, but he also knows this team. And he knows that he was a first-year manager of a team that was not supposed to go anywhere. That team was probably going to be dismantled in midseason. And they unexpectedly got hot. They kept all those guys together. They kept Quintana, they kept Manaya, they kept Severino. And because they kept those guys, they now have a rotation that could potentially get them into a World Series spot now. And none of it works if Mendoza doesn't push the right buttons in this case. And I mean, it also there's a fair amount of sharing the success with Jeremy Hefner, the Mets pitching coach, but also the way those guys stepped up. And Manaya had a terrible year last year, and it's particularly 180. Now Manaya looks like he was one of the biggest bargains of the offseason. Severino, terrible season. People weren't sure if he was going to pitch the entire year. He's been a dependable force for the Mets. Quintana, people were not expecting that guy to be around after this year, and now it's looking more and more like, okay, like they may actually like keep him around for another year or two, depending on how it all plays out. And the Mets are going to have a lot of questions to focus on in the offseason, but not yet. And they're going to keep riding out this magic as long as they can, and hopefully it's 8 more wins. And that's for what has been a crazy season, a crazy postseason, and crazy really everything this year. To say they are 8 wins away from winning a World Series, it's terrifying. It's terrifying, but it's also really, really exciting. And you're just hoping right now that they have just enough magic left in them. And those great Met teams, they were called the Miracle Mets for a reason. 1969, that team had magic in them. I think this team has some magic in them also. Let's go Mets.
Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets podcast. Please be sure to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Finally, please also follow the podcast Twitter, which is Mike's Mets Pod, all one word. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening. Let's go Mets.